Alright, what is up everybody? So welcome to Pride Month 2025. All of the homophobes, all the transphobes, all the white supremacists, all the racists. If you don't like black people, if you don't like white people, if you don't like Muslims, if you don't like Asians, doesn't matter to me. Everybody's welcome. What the hell has happened to the human civilization as a whole, right? Everything is progressing backwards, right? People are having less sex than ever before. We're creating a society that's full of incels, that's full of leftover women. Everybody's feeling a sense of dread. Everybody's feeling hopeless. So nobody seems to be optimistic about the future. Young people don't have any friends. They don't want to enter relationships. They don't want to get married. And they don't want to have children. What the hell has really happened? Well, if you're living in a Western country, you can blame it on the immigrants or refugees, right? If you're some old school white Canadian guy, you may be saying that, oh, we have way too many goddamn immigrants and refugees in this country. Multiculturalism is not working out. It's destroying our country. It's destroying our Judeo-Christian values. Yes, I do agree with some of those points. I think immigration is a massive problem in Western countries. But for you guys to really understand what is actually going on, you guys need to see the whole picture, the entire picture, the really big picture. Because it's not just about immigrants, it's not just about multiculturalism. For example, if you look at countries like China, if you look at South Korea, by the way, South Korea is consistently ranked as the most depressing country on earth, and South Korea is 99% homogenous. And look at Japan, right? Their aging population is reaching a critical point. So, it's not just happening in Western countries, right? What has happened? Well, someone has said this many decades ago. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences has been a disaster for the human race. How come, finding your soulmate, finding a spouse, making friends, right? Just being happy, being optimistic about the future has become impossible. I'll tell you guys exactly what happened. So I was lucky enough to have traveled to 24 different cities across China for the past 6 months. And it's been a life-changing experience. So for over a month, I stayed in the capital city of Sichuan province. So the city is called Chengdu. So that city has 22 million people. So this is one of the largest cities, not just in China, probably in the world, by total landmass and also by total population. And also, by the way, so Chengdu is actually the panda capital of the world, right? If you guys go to Chunxi Road in downtown Chengdu, you'll see that giant panda with its ass hanging out. Just have a look at this footage. So this is just another typical day in Chengdu if you're taking any form of public transit, whether if you're taking the high-speed rail or the subway or the bus. Just have a look at the sheer volume of people. And just imagine what this does to your mental health, right? So this is the issue when any civilization industrializes way too fast. And as a direct result, you have the rise of these mega cities with 10, 20, 30, or even 35 million people. So one of the many struggles young people talk about, it's the housing availability, right? Purchasing home is becoming impossible. Even when you adjust the numbers for inflation, right? The housing market has gotten so expensive. And when people can't afford to buy homes, you have to rent. And obviously, when nobody can afford to purchase home, everybody has to rent. Then the rent will skyrocket. So it's making life impossible for youths today. Well, you have to think about it like this, right? So take an example like China, right? China is one of the largest countries in the world. The issue is that the majority of the population are concentrated on just a few dozen spots scattered across the country. I'll give you guys another example. Here's a map of Australia. Just look at those red dots, right? Look at how massive Australia is. So this is the massive issue when we have the rise of these global metropolis across the world, right? So, for example, the city of Chengdu, which has 22 million people, and obviously with this many people, there are going to be a lot of job opportunities. There are going to be a lot of opportunities in the dating market. There are going to be a lot of opportunities for you to start a business here in order to grow your career. But what happens, when everybody across the country, when they all want to move to the mega city in order to search for a better life, right? When the majority of the population are concentrated on just a few dozen cities across the country, right? You have too many humans that's converging on a single spot. And obviously what's going to happen is that there is going to be a major shortage of housing. And despite China having the second largest GDP in the world, right? So the vast majority of the wealth are being concentrated on a very small percentage of people. A vast majority of young people worldwide, doesn't matter which part of the world you live in, vast majority of the young people, they don't have any money. And what happens when you move to the big city, when housing and rent is so expensive, and when you don't have any money, you have to rent one of those micro apartments. Have you guys seen these micro apartments? Basically, they look like a bunch of jail cells, these coffin homes. You can look up these tiny apartments in Seoul, in Tokyo, in Beijing, in Shanghai. Just look at how these young people are living. Oftentimes, it's just a tiny little room. You're surrounded by walls on all four sides, right? And oftentimes, these places, they're not soundproof. Oftentimes, you have to share just one shower and one bathroom with 10, 15, possibly 20 other people. Imagine if that was your life 24/7. You'd be filled with a sense of dread and claustrophobia constantly. Imagine what that does to your mental health, right? No wonder why so many Gen Z, millennials, and Gen Alpha, they're going so crazy all the time. They're running away from home. They're just spazzing out. They're suffering from PTSD. Why do you guys think that all of these super rich people, these millionaires and billionaires, they all have these massive mansions in the countryside? Would any of these rich people ever live in one of these places? Absolutely not, right? You guys ever watch those cave exploring videos when those guys are constantly getting stuck with no way out? Yeah, that's what you feel like 24/7, and it's going to be extremely detrimental to your mental health. And also, by living in these tiny micro apartments, you will have zero privacy, right? You can hear everything that's on your left. You can hear everything on your right. You can hear the couple that's constantly bitching and arguing on your left. And right above you, you will hear the hot and steamy couple having sex every single night. You can hear the moaning, you can hear the bed springs, and it will be impossible for you to get a good night rest. And just imagine every time you wanted to go outside, if you want to have some quality leisure time, imagine just trying to visit a temple to pray. Imagine trying to go to the amusement park, and this is what you have to deal with every single day. So there's a great saying in China. It's called 人山人海, which literally translates to people mountain, people sea. I think it's the perfect phrase to describe these kind of situations. And what happens when you live in a city of 10, 20, 30 million people? Imagine the traffic. Imagine how would you feel, right? Every single day, right? When you wake up, when you're going to work, right? Every time you turn on your car and when you get onto the road, the traffic is a complete gridlock. Every single day, 24/7. It's just like the LA freeway. It's pretty much the largest parking lot in the world, right? Imagine how you would feel when you're constantly stuck in traffic, right? Let's say then your 8 hours or 9 hours or 10 hours workday turns into 11, 12, 13 hours because you have to spend so much time being stuck in traffic. Imagine all of the pollutions that's coming out of these vehicles. The noise, the honking, the road rage, that's something you have to deal with every single day. Yeah, no shit. No wonder why so many people are there having a mental health breakdown. Now, let's say, imagine, right, you're someone who is from a small town and you want to move to the big city because you want the opportunity to make lots of money, right? Let's say if there's a university right next to where you live and you think this is going to be a great opportunity to just open up your own food truck. And let's say if you want to sell some fried chicken, right? Let's say right in front of your university, you have your own food truck and you sell your fried chicken combo for $15. And let's say your business is booming, everything is going great, you're making 6 figures, right? Then all of a sudden, right, because everybody else around you, they're noticing that, oh my God, look at this guy. He just opened this brand new food truck selling fried chicken, $15 a portion, right? And his business is going so well. So we want to make some money too. And why can't we do the same thing? So next thing you know, right, after you made a lot of money after 3 months, someone else opens up a fried chicken food truck right next to you. And then instead of charging $15, this guy charges $14.50. Do you know what's going to happen? Your business is going to be halved overnight, just like that. This is why having too many people converging on one single spot is a terrible idea. So if you guys ever watch those rankings, right, on the happiest countries in the world, what countries typically come out on top, right? If you look at the more recent reports, right, it's usually countries in Scandinavia, Well, I wouldn't say Sweden will make that list anymore. I think Sweden has a 100% fallen, but some of the other countries you might see could be Norway, could be Denmark, it could be Iceland. So, what is the common denominator amongst all of those countries? Well, one thing, yes, those countries are, 98, 99% homogenous. So the vast majority of the population are white. Yes, that is one aspect. Yes, I do agree to a certain degree that multiculturalism has 100% failed. But also there's something else that you have to remember, right? Those are countries with very, very small populations, right? And there's going to be 10 times less competition versus, for example, if you lived in the UK or Spain or France. So let's move away from these small Scandinavian countries back to the mega cities, right? Imagine just trying to search for a high-paying job. Well, for a regular dude, it's going to be almost impossible. When I was traveling to the city of Xi'an, it's actually the second most visited Chinese city right behind the capital, Beijing. So while I was checking out the giant wild goose pagoda, so there was this really tall Chinese tour guide, about 6'3". He was this guy was in shape. He was wearing glasses, and he was leading a group of foreign tourists. So obviously I was expecting this guy to be, speaking Chinglish, like Chinese English, right? He was leading this group of foreign tourists and telling them about, Chinese history. Then this 6'3" Chinese guy, he starts speaking fluent Parisian French, like 100% fluent. So obviously this guy has probably spent many, many years living abroad. He probably studied in France. Maybe he possibly has a university degree over there. He was an international student at some point, and he decided to come back to China. And obviously in China it's going to be extremely valuable because, how many Chinese people can speak fluent French, right? So this is the problem, right? If you as a normal dude, right, if you want to come to the big city, right, where you're searching for a job, you have to compete with these kind of Chinese chats, right? Let's say if you're just a 5'7" regular Chinese guy, what chances do you have in the dating market when you're going up competing against these type of guys, right? This is the problem, right? These mega cities, they're filled with all of these chats and Stacy's, and the regular average shows will have no chance. This is why you have extreme hypergamy, because when these young, attractive, beautiful women, when they move to the big city, they can meet all these super rich, super tall, super good-looking chats every single day. And obviously, even the women who are married or in a relationship, they're always going to think that somebody is better out there because they constantly see super tall, super successful, super good-looking men. So the temptation is always going to be there for them to cheat on their boyfriends. And this is the massive reason why in the mega cities, like I mentioned before, right, I always say the divorce rate is probably at least 60%, versus if you travel to the countryside, there are virtually no divorces, because in the countryside, people have much fewer options, right? Women might be thinking that maybe their husband is not the best, but if she surveys around the area where she's living in, and honestly, there's not really any better options out there. And but when she's living in a city of 22 million people, there's going to be all kinds of opportunities for her. So, and it's much more than that. If you guys have seen some of my previous videos, I posted a video that was 14 minutes and 44 seconds long. And I do highly recommend everybody that's interested in my contents to also check out that video. So I did stay in the remote Chinese countryside for about a week. I'm talking about really, really country, right? Far away from the concrete jungle, away from all the noises, away from all the pollution, and when there's pretty much absolutely nothing. I stayed in a town of roughly 10,000 people, right? Really nothing much to it. So, and this is a massive problem because in this tiny town I stayed in, right, there was virtually no young people, right? All the schools have closed down. Even the local hospital has closed down due to declining population. This is what happens when the mega cities, they suck up all the human resources, all the talents, all the young people from across the province, and the countryside is 100% abandoned. That little village is completely rotting away. Only the old and sick remains. Even the daycare has shut down permanently, so there's absolutely nothing left. I gotta tell you guys, it was so depressing, right? So in this place, it's probably been decades since the sound of children has been heard. And when you're walking around, when the average age of the village is probably like 75 years old, it is the most depressing sight ever. And honestly, I think this is one huge aspect a lot of people don't think about, right? You think about, the possibilities, the joys and the happiness that children can bring into your life. Because, nobody wants to sit around and look at a bunch of old and sick people all the time. time, right? This is why so many nurses and these personal support workers, they often suffer from extreme stress, from anxiety, from mental breakdowns at their job, because they always have to deal with these old and sick people. So what I found was interesting was that, I stayed in this very tiny village, right? Everybody in the tiny villages, they all stay together. So I did mention before, right, this whole thing, right, the rampant divorces, the fall of the nuclear family, right, it's not just happening in the Western world, right, it's not the 100% the cause of multiculturalism. Even in a homogenous country like China, the divorce rate is roughly 50%, but in the countryside, there are very, very few divorces, and I can tell you guys exactly why there are very few divorces. Well, number one, I did mention, right, in the big cities, there are too many Chats and Stacy's. Women always think that they can do better. And in the countryside, there's not that much option for you to choose from, right? So what you get is what you get. And many women say that, this is the best I can do, then this is the best I can do. And also in the countryside, everything relies on manual labor. The place I stayed at, right, there was only one barbershop. There was only one restaurant where you can go and order some food. And the options are very, very limited. This is obviously due to the results of a rapid declining population in the countryside. Everything's being abandoned, right? So everybody that remained in the village, all the old people, right, if they wanted to eat something, you got to do it yourself, right? If you want to eat some vegetables, you got to grow your own vegetables. Everybody had their own garden. If you want to eat some meat, right, if you want to eat some eggs or some chicken, right, you got to raise your own chicken. You got to kill your own chicken. If you want to eat some pork, and you got to raise your own little pigling, you have to feed and take care of the pigs. And then when the time comes, you have to butcher and prepare the meat all by yourself. There's nobody there to help you. So this is very important. This is why the nuclear family unit is so important in the countryside, because everything relies on manual labor. So it will be a massive problem. So, if these wives, if they're not happy in their marriages, if they're thinking about divorcing their husband, now they have to think that, they have to do all of the work on the field all by themselves, right? So this is a massive deterrent for these Chinese women who are living in the countryside to stop them from filing for divorce. But what happens when women move to these mega cities, the concrete jungles? Now there's job available exclusively for women. So many of these companies that offer these white-collar jobs, right, they have 50% quotas for women. Now a woman can get an office job. All she has to do is attend a couple of Zoom meetings or Microsoft Teams meetings. All she has to do is press a couple of keys on the keyboard and send out some emails, right? She gets to sit around in air conditioning. She gets to spin around in her own chair. And if she's too lazy, there are simply cleaning services available, right? She can just simply send a text and send a payment. Then someone's going to show up to her apartment. And if she's too lazy, if she does not want to cook at all, and there's restaurants, there's street food, there's takeouts everywhere. So basically, this woman, she never has to cook or clean ever again because all the services are available. And this is just one of the many issues when any civilization industrializes too quickly, because it makes women independent from men. And part of the reason why the marriage rates in China has declined by over 60% in just the past 12 years is because, women are more financially independent than ever before. And also with the rise of things like social media, right? Think about it like, 30, 40 years ago, right? Let's say if a group of friends, right, they haven't got together in a while, right? Let's say if they decide, to call each other in order to organize some kind of a road trip or a party, right? And let's say if you haven't seen your friends in 6 months, and then your bestie, after not having seen her for 3, 4, 5 months, then she shows you in person her diamond ring on her ring finger. Then everybody is going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're getting engaged. You're going to get married. You're going to become a mom. This is so exciting. And maybe there's another friend that you haven't seen so long. She shows off her baby bump to you. And everybody is going to be super psyched. Everybody is going to be so happy and so excited. They're saying that, oh my God, you're finally pregnant. You're going to be a brand new mom. This is all so exciting. But what has happened since the rise of social media? Now, all of that adrenaline, now all of that the excitement, right? The surprise factor from just meeting a friend for the first time in a few months, right? All of that is gone. All of those hormones, all of those emotions, because someone will simply just post that on Instagram or TikTok or something. And you see that, you leave a comment, you leave a like, you say, oh, congratulations, you're getting engaged, right? Congratulations, you're going to become a mom. So that surprise factor, right? That human connection, just that, that simple touch, a hug, a kiss, all of that emotions, it's all gone. Now it's all turned into just staring at your phone screen 24/7. So that's why so many people are dead inside, right? I've been reading a lot of these studies. I think basically what they're saying that is that in Western countries, right, the average screen time on their phones for youths between 12 to 16, I think it's something like 5 hours a day. Yeah, and you wonder why everybody's dead inside, right? The Unabomber is 100% correct. Think about, China, let's say back 30, 40, 50 years ago. China was one of the poorest countries in the world in terms of GDP per capita. When everybody was broke, I mean, honestly, the dating game was a lot easier. But now what has happened, right? A very, very small percentage of men has gotten extremely wealthy, right? And with the rise of technology, with the rapid rise of all of these transits in China, people now, they can take these high-speed rails. Anybody can book a flight. They can travel from the north to the south in just 3 or 4 hours, right? Now these super rich, super wealthy, super successful men, right, with the rise of internet and social media, they can have access to all the gorgeous 18 to 25-year-olds all across the country, right? They could be living in a mega city of 20 million people, let's say if they're CEO making a few $1,000,000 a year. And as they're scrolling through social media, they see a very attractive, a very cute little Chinese girl. Let's say that's 3 hours away. Let's say that's living in a small village. This guy can now raise her up. He can tell her that, hey, how you doing? I got a couple $1,000,000 in my bank account. I got a Lamborghini. How about I pay for your flight? Here's an extra credit card with $20,000 for you to go shopping. So yeah, why don't you come to my city and I will show you my crib. So yes, the rise of technology, the rise of these rapid transportations, the flights, the high-speed rails, the trains, the subways, the rise of social media, the rise of a very small percentage of men that's getting extremely wealthy. This means that, if you do become the top 1%, it is easier than ever before for these men to have access with all the attractive women from all across the country, meaning that, the dating game for the average Joe will become impossible. And as a direct result of all of this, right, the countryside, especially in countries like China, in countries like Japan, in countries like South Korea, is being 100% abandoned. Everybody wants to come to the big city. And what happens when people come to the big city, right, when everybody converges on just a tiny few spots across the country, the housing market becomes a nightmare. The traffic becomes a nightmare. And there's so much noise. There's so much pollution. There's so many people everywhere. The job market is extremely competitive. The dating market is extremely competitive, right? We're a very small percentage of super rich, super successful men. They have access to all the women. And this means that the birth rate is going to plummet. Not just in the mega cities, but also in the countryside. Because in the countryside, all of the young people are gone, right? If you want to look for a partner, where are you going to find these people? It's only old and sick people who are left. And when you go to the big city, things cost 3 times, 5 times, possibly 10 times more versus if you live in a small town. So, getting married and actually having children, it becomes an impossible dream for 90% of the population. And that is exactly why, if you look at some of the fertility rates in mega cities, for example, if you look at the Chinese city of Hong Kong, so the fertility rate is about 0.77 children per woman. And if you guys want to look at the Chinese capital of Beijing, also the Chinese city with the highest GDP, which is the port city of Shanghai. So in these two mega cities, so Shanghai roughly has 24 million people. So Beijing roughly has 22 million people. The fertility rate is about 0.6 children per woman. If you guys want to look at the country with the lowest birth rate in the world, which is South Korea, look at the capital, Seoul. So the fertility rate in the city of Seoul, the capital of South Korea, is 0.53 children per woman. By the way, the replacement rate is 2.11. So you're looking at a quarter of the replacement level. That's why the population collapse is inevitable. And the exact same phenomenon is happening in almost all European countries, right? For example, look at Germany, and obviously a subject to a lot of controversy in recent years, especially during Angela Merkel's term, right? Obviously, a lot of people don't agree with her, but people keep voting for her to stay in power, right? So Angela Merkel, obviously, one of her most controversial decisions was to let in millions and millions of Muslims into Germany. I do believe Germany is actually the Muslim capital of Europe now. They're saying that something like 15 or even 20% of the German population is actually Muslim now. But you guys have to understand there's a reasons for this, right? Because at the way, for example, if you look at South Korea, look at their current demographic projections, in less than 100 years time, if these fertility rates do keep up, the ethnic South Koreans will be completely wiped off from the map, and their history, their language, their culture, their people will have disappeared completely into oblivion because nobody's getting married and nobody's having children. And just have a look at this chart. Look at Germany's birth rates. Look at how insanely low these numbers are. Remember, the replacement rate is 2.11 children per woman. So to all the white people out there who are saying that, oh, we don't want immigrants, we don't want refugees, our continent, our countries are being invaded, our religions being attacked, we're losing our identity. The only way for you to continue as a civilization is that, the young man, woman, they have to get married and have children, right? So you're talking about, the white population is disappearing. So why are so many people allergic to having children? And look at these fertility rates from 1990 to 2014, right? Germany recorded some of the lowest birth rates on earth for 24 years. That's why Germany was forced to take in millions of Muslims, because if you actually do your research, if you look up the statistics, right, between 1990, since the unification of Germany, to the year of 2014, Germany shut down 3,000 public schools in Germany was shut down due to record low birth rates because nobody's getting married, nobody's having children. So at some point, you as white people, you do have to take responsibility as well. Like, what the hell are you guys doing, right? And you can't just say, oh, it's because the economy is so bad, right? This is from 1990 to 2014. This is before the inflation era where everything got so expensive and actually getting married and having children and buying a home became impossible. And also Germany, right, it's still the #1 economic powerhouse in the EU. You guys have the strongest economy in the European Union, but still nobody wants to get married and nobody wants to have children. So, I can expand on this topic for many, many hours. I can talk about this all day. Think about the Amish, think about the Mennonites. You might think these people are 100% ridiculous, right? But here's the thing, right? Understand the Amish people in 2025. Where can you find a lot of Amish people? You can probably go to Middletown, Ohio. So that's where JD Vance is from. I bet he knows a little bit about these Amish people as well. And if you're living, let's say, somewhere in the province of Ontario in Canada, if you go to there's a little town in southern Ontario, it's called the Listowel. So Listowel is a pretty small town, I think roughly 15,000 people. If you guys go to the countryside, go see the farmlands surrounding that little town of Listowel, you will see a lot of these Amish people. I understand that they're not 100% like Amish anymore. Some of them, they do use some form of technology. Like sometimes if you have to travel really, really far, I've seen these Amish people drive a car, and some of these Amish people, they do use a modern day phone, and sometimes they do use power tools. Because nowadays it's impossible to stay away from technology 100%. If you don't use these power tools, right, there's no way for you to meet these modern day productivity quotas and for you to compete with your competitors, right? The Amish people, they still need to make money. They still need to make a living because, they have wives, because they have children to take care of. But I did mention, right, like the case with South Korea. So they're facing a population nuclear bomb. In less than 100 years, the entire Korean civilization will have completely disappeared into oblivion, right? But think about the Amish. And guess what? If you look at America, look at Canada, look at Australia, look at all of the countries in Europe, right? Yes, you might not like the immigrants, you might not like the refugees, but just look at Germany. In just 24 years, Germany shut down 3,000 public schools. Like, are you kidding me? Yes, the population is getting replaced, but here's the thing, even without immigrants and refugees, the ethnic Germans, they're facing the exact same demographic nuclear bomb as South Korea, right? In less than 100 years' time, right, the ethnic Germans will have completely disappeared into oblivion because nobody's getting married, nobody's having children. You guys can laugh at the Mennonites, you guys can laugh at the Amish all you want, but guess what? What do you guys think is the average fertility rate for an Amish couple? It's roughly 6 children per woman. You guys can mock the Amish, you guys can mock the Mennonites, right? These ultra-conservative Christians all you want. But guess what? They're having 6 children for women. And guess what? In the Amish community, there's no sex before marriage. They don't believe in birth control. They don't believe in having children out of wedlock. And they don't believe in divorce. They believe in monogamy. And you have one partner for life. And you stay married for life. For better or for worse, in sickness and in health. And yes, I understand. Obviously, not everything is perfect in the Amish community. I understand that, of course, there are some Amish women who are forced to stay in some extremely abusive marriages with their partners. I understand, unfortunately, there are some rare cases where these Amish children are facing sexual harassment from family members. I 100% understand. Not everything's perfect, but the point I'm trying to make is that 300 years from now, the Amish, the Mennonites, they will still exist. 3,000 years from now, the Amish and the Mennonites, they will exist. But, just look at other countries worldwide. Look at the South Koreans. In less than 100 years, they will have completely died off, right? The ethnic Germans, in less than 100 years, they will have completely died off, right? And of course, in a couple hundred years' time, I imagine Germany will still be around. But I imagine the faces of those, ethnic Germans, they will look quite different due to the country taking in immigrants and refugees. But here's the thing, right? All of the native Germans, you guys don't want to have any children. And if you look at countries like China and Japan, and they're not too far behind. I would say probably in another 150 years, possibly 175, 200 years maximum, right? All of the ethnic Chinese people and all the ethnic Japanese people will have completely disappeared because nobody wants to get married, nobody wants to have children, right? Example, right? So China in 2013, that's not that long ago. That was 12 years ago. Yeah, in 2013, China had 13.5 million marriages. But in 2024, China's marriage rate was down to just 6 million. So 11 years time, marriage rates in China plummets by over 60%. And it's also very important. In China, is something called hukou. Hukou is your household registration. So in China, it is against the law 100%. So the Chinese couples, you cannot have any children out of wedlock. You have to be married to each other in order for you to have children. So what happens when marriage rates plummets by over 60%? That means birth rates also plummets by over 60%. Yeah, nobody's having any children anymore. And so at this point, you guys have been hearing me talk for a very, very long time, right? You guys are probably thinking, is there a solution? There's only one solution, okay? I did mention before, right? As much as I am against some of these modern practices, for example, abortion, yes, I do think abortion is murder. However, this is where I differ from many people like Michael Knowles or Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk or Candace Owens, because I don't think abortion should be made illegal. That's not the number one issue. Also with divorce, right? Some people think, should divorce be illegal? Well, no, because here's the thing, right? What if you're just a really, really good guy, or you're extremely hardworking, you're doing everything in your power to provide for your wife and for your children, and one day out of nowhere, your wife decides to be a hoe and she joins OnlyFans, and she's live streaming herself getting drilled by 2 other guys every single night. What are you supposed to do? I think at that point, you will have to file for divorce, right? And also it's the same thing, right? If you're the dictionary definition of a perfect feminine woman, you're very young, you're very attractive, and you respect your husband, you submit to him, and you're doing everything in your power to become the woman of the household, to become the perfect role model for your children. Then out of nowhere, right, your husband comes out of the closet. Turns out that he's actually gay. He has been gay this whole time. He's been hiding it. And he's out there sucking other guys' egg rolls. So what are you supposed to do? Yeah, at this point, I do think that you will have to file for divorce. You see, these topics, abortion, marriage, divorce, fall of nuclear family, sometimes it's very complicated. In reality, I believe there's only one solution to all of this. Yeah, what did I say about the Amish? What did I say about the Mennonites, the ultra-conservative Christians, right? You have to bring back religion. You have to bring back the traditional Judeo-Christian values. A lot of people might be triggered when I say Judeo-Christian values. Listen, Christianity branched off from Judaism. Okay, I understand a lot of people, you guys have negative opinions about Israel. I can understand with everything that's been happening for the past few years, but I understand, okay, there's Judaism and there's Zionism. Those are 2 completely separate entities. And I do believe someone like Ben Shapiro, he has completely shifted away from Judaism. Because, these people are extremely religious, the Mennonites and the Amish. But, thousands of years from now, the Amish and the Mennonites, they will still be around. But the Chinese, the Japanese, the Germans, the South Koreans, they will have disappeared into oblivion. Because these societies, they're becoming more and more secular every single day. Because if you don't believe in God, You don't believe in nothing. If you don't believe in God, it means that you actually believe in anything. That's why, right? Infidelity is okay. It's okay for me to cheat on my boyfriend. It's okay for me to cheat on my wife. Because who cares, right? God is not real. Who is there to judge me? What does God tell you, right? Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not murder. So God is not real. So who cares? I can go out and steal. I can go out and burn. I can be an arsonist. I can loot. I can murder. I can beat up anybody I want to. I can smuggle fentanyl across the southern US border, causing 100,000 deaths from overdose every single year. Because who cares? Who is there to judge me? Because God is not real. None of this really matters. I mean, I can go on and elaborate on the topic of religion for the next hour, but I'm just looking at the timestamp. This video is already getting too long. Just one final point, right? To the people saying that, God is not real, you don't need religion, right? Imagine this, right? It's a summer right now. Let's say if you book a vacation to Mexico. Let's say, if you're just out there in remote Mexico, you're hiking in the jungles. And unfortunately, because you're not familiar with the area, you end up getting lost. Now you're in the middle of nowhere and you can't find your way out. Let's say if you're trapped in this forest in remote Mexico, 24 hours have passed, right? So you have exhausted all of your resources. Your phone has died and you have no more food. You have no more water. Now you're absolutely freaking out, right? Let's say if it's the middle of the night, right? And when all hope is lost, out of nowhere, 10 men starts to approach you from the shadows inside this remote Mexican forest. And these 10 men, they don't necessarily have to be Mexican. They could be any man. They could be 10 Chinese guys, 10 Japanese guys, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Nigerian, Egyptian, Canadian. It doesn't matter. It can be from any part of the world. They can be of any ethnic background. But let's say there are two scenarios, right? Scenario A, right? These 10 men who are approaching you in this remote forest in Mexico, they're wearing a hoodie. And in the middle of that hoodie, it says 4 words. It says, God is not real. So imagine this is what's happening to you in scenario A. These 10 men wearing the same hoodies starts to approach you from the shadows when you have absolutely nothing. You're panicking, you're freaking out. Now you're wearing a hoodie that says God is not real. Or would you guys want scenario B? Scenario B is that these 10 men, exact same 10 men, once again, they could be Mexican, they could be Asian, Indian, white, black, Arab, it doesn't really matter. This time, they're wearing the exact same hoodie. But however, this time, right in the middle of the hoodie, you see 3 words being printed right in the middle. And those 3 words are Christ, it's King. Yes. Do you guys want these 10 men to be wearing the hoodie that's saying God is not real? Or would you guys rather have these 10 men wearing a hoodie that says Christ, it's King? So, I mean, the decision's up to you. This is why you need religion. This is why you need God. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video and actually watching my content all the way until the end. And so the next video is going to be quite short because this video has already been so long. And always remember this, God is real.